Why hello there, and welcome back to Tabletop Ferox. And I am skulking around a graveyard, so that must mean it is once again time to dig up the corpse of an RPG series and poke at its entrails with a stick. Which would be a rather rude way to phrase it, if not for the fact that I am talking about All Flesh Must Be Eaten, the first, possibly best, but definitely most prolific zombie role-playing game. Which, unfortunately, has not had a single release since 2013, so I think at this point we can safely say that this one's not getting back up. And if you want some more general information on the game, I did a very thorough review of it, as I do, and you can check that out now or later or whatever. But now, let's dig up the rotted, festering corpse of All Flesh Must Be Eaten. Our story begins in 1999 with the release of the core rulebook. Kinda. Despite a projected November 1999 release date, a little internet sleuthing reveals that the books didn't actually ship until February 2000. And I would just like to take a moment to point out how amazing of a resource the Internet Archive Wayback Machine is for researching these kinds of videos. Not only can I find the pre-release product page for a 23-year-old book, but I can also learn that they were giving away promotional All Flesh Must Be Eaten chocolate bars with pre-orders, which is something that was very fun to learn. So I'm just going to go ahead and say February 2000, All Flesh Must Be Eaten core rulebook. And just in general, I will be going off the shipping dates when available, unless there is an earlier PDF release date, which I will use instead. Anyway, the core rulebook, 232-page hardcover containing the core rules, obviously, with 3 character types, the Norm, Survivor, and Inspired, 35 standard and 6 supernatural qualities and drawbacks, 7 miracles, which are basically spells, and this is a little odd because they use the same basic essence system for a variety of things, and for the sake of consistency and clarity, I will just be referring to all of these things as essence abilities. There are also 64 skills and 12 archetypes, which is what they call pre-generated characters. 28 melee weapons, 28 general ranged weapons, 7 World War II firearms, and a flamethrower, 5 explosive and incendiary weapons, 16 types of armor, 14 vehicles ranging from horse to bicycle to armored personnel carrier, and 34 pieces of miscellaneous equipment. Yeah, if you're not familiar with this game, it doesn't have a single setting. It is intended to be played in any setting, so they provided a very wide selection of equipment. Then we have 11 dead worlds, which are what they call settings, and as mentioned, this game covers a very wide range, and in this case, the dead worlds cover from 11th century to post-apocalypse, with 24 story ideas, 13 different types of zombie, and 12 additional NPCs and other non-zombie enemies, which I am just going to call non-zombs from this point forward, split between them. Then a whole zombie creation system for making your own zombies, with 62 different zombie aspects, but a lot of those are in specific categories that are choose one of these 8 options, so it's not exactly 62 options, but it's still a respectable zombie creation system. And that is basically it for the core book, other than an appendix, which is basically just a list of zombie media, which I guess could have been useful before the internet, but the internet was a thing when this came out, and I've looked up a lot of the items on this list, and it's very much just a list of zombie media, not a good list. But now on to June 2001, and All Flesh Must Be Eaten Introductory Game Kit, a 20-page PDF which contains quick start rules, 6 archetypes, and a short introductory adventure with 2 zombies and 3 non-zombs. It is, however, not a very good introductory adventure, I say as someone who has run it for a group of new players. It significantly lacks direction. Next we have November 2001 and the Zombie Master screen, which is your basic GM screen, but also came with a 48-page booklet containing a one-shot adventure, Coffee Break of the Living Dead, with 6 cast members, aka archetypes, aka pre-generated characters. They are really inconsistent with their terminology, especially in the earlier books. one type of zombie and one NPC who really does not contribute anything at all. The book also contains new rules for different campaign levels, an alternate skill point generation system, expanded rules for zombie player characters with an example zombie character, 2 new supernatural qualities, 9 new zombie aspects, including acid vomiting, and an essay on zombie survival horror. And if you are interested in trying All Flesh Must Be Eaten, I do recommend Coffee Break of the Living Dead as a good introductory adventure. It basically just drops the players into a situation that they have to get out of via 1 or 2 very clear paths. So it has simple, clear goals, and that is really good for new players. Next up, March 2002 and Enter the Zombie, a 168-page softcover, which is not what you're thinking. I mean, it's cool if that's what you're into, but that's not what this is. It is a zombie martial arts supplement. Yeah, the first source book they came up with was Kung Fu Zombies, and contains basic rules, information, and advice for running a Hong Kong action film style game, including 2 new character types, the martial artist and shooter, an expansion to the martial arts skill which adds 21 combat moves, and 39 special chi techniques, which are essence abilities. 34 assorted Eastern weapons, because no matter how much an Eastern game is focused on one specific culture, there will always be Japanese weapons. Another set of guidelines for zombie player characters with an undead martial arts example character, and 38 new zombie aspects, which are kinda weird ones like an entrail whip, bone blades, and flesh holsters. So, gross, but also cool. And 4 new Dead Worlds, which are much more thorough than the ones in the core book, probably because there are 4 of them instead of 11, and each provides a bunch of setting information, 2 story ideas, 4 archetypes, as well as appropriate zombies and non-zombs for each scenario. And one even has a magic system with 7 spells, which are of course essence abilities. But now we exit the zombie and enter January 2003, and Pulp Zombies, a 152-page softcover covering zombie adventures in the Pulp era, and contains basic rules, information, and advice for running a Pulp-style game, 2 new character types, the Pulp Hero and Legendary Hero, 11 period-accurate firearms and other miscellaneous equipment, 4 general qualities and 2 new supernatural ones, Gadget Master and Mentalism, which are worth noting individually because the Gadget Master comes with a whole gadget system, and 7 example gadgets like a flying car, and the Mentalism quality comes with a whole Mentalism system with 6 Mentalism powers, which are not essence abilities. It is a unique system, albeit one that they openly admit to lifting from CJ Carella's Witchcraft. There are also 7 archetypes and 3, let's just call them advanced Dead Worlds. One of which features a full adventure, one of which features 4 one-ish page story concepts, and one that has 3 very short story ideas, and features Martians instead of zombies for some reason. And then there are 4 basic Dead Worlds, which are only 2 to 5 pages each, most of which contain some kind of scenario, plus zombies and non-zombs. But now on to March 2003 and Fistful o' Zombies, a 144-page softcover zombie western sourcebook, with basic rules, information, and advice on playing in the fictional West, along with everything that comes along with that. It provides 2 new qualities, new and expanded rules for gunfighting, lassos, horse riding, with the inclusion of zombie horse stats, and hanging, and rules for hanging for some reason, along with a wide selection of period-appropriate equipment, including 3 melee and 11 ranged weapons, and 4 archetypes. Then there are 4 advanced Dead Worlds with the normal zombies, non-zombs, archetypes, and adventures/scenarios, but now also a handful of character options, and 3 much smaller, almost just kind of world ideas. And then, for some reason, Deadlands conversion rules. And overall, it is a book that seems like it's much more interested in being a Western source book than a zombie Western source book. Like, the Singing Cowboys Dead World even states that the zombies are just kind of arbitrarily added. They try to do it in a cool meta way, but I think it's still tipping their hand a bit more than they really wanted to. And this is something of a continuing issue throughout the entire series. Like, remember, one of the dead worlds from Pulp Zombies didn't even have zombies. Then in April 2003, the Revised Edition Core Rulebook, a 256-page hardcover, although revised mainly just means new cover art, very minor layout and text fixes, and the addition of D20 Modern conversion rules. You know, D20 Modern, that thing that was supposed to become the industry standard but then only lasted for like 4 years. And also, I did one of these videos on. And now ahead to July 2003, and the Book of Archetypes, a 48-page softcover which contains 41 archetypes, but also expanded skill uses, 6 new qualities, 1 new miracle, and some assorted equipment. Then September 2003, and The Little Town of Hamlin, which is a 14-page PDF, yes, a PDF-exclusive product in 2003. Eden Studios was a bit ahead of the curve on that one. And this is a full adventure set in the Dead at 1000 Dead world from the core book, with the things that you find in an adventure. And notably, is the only full-color All Flesh Must Be Eaten book. Then December 2003, and Atlas of the Walking Dead, a 112-page softcover containing undead from around the world, providing 17 different creatures from Aztec Mummy to Vrykolakus, a thing that I'm sure I pronounced correctly. Each of which is provided with a bunch of lore, stats, variations, which are mostly just similar creatures from other mythologies. For example, Rakshasa are listed as a variation of ghouls, and short story ideas for using each of the creatures. Also, a selection on undead animals, new rules for holding your breath, it's relevant for one of the things, 54 new zombie aspects, including a new weight category and a new supernatural ability. And this is honestly one of the cooler books in the entire product line, as it does really dive into creatures from a lot of different cultures that you don't see represented a lot in gaming. But then, also the problems with that. But the real notable thing here is that some of these are definitely not zombies. Like, there are 2 kinds of mummy and 2 kinds of vampire. Like, specifically, mummies and vampires by name. Also things that are a bit more difficult to peg down, like a Pentagolan, and I am counting them as zombies because they do all use the game's zombie creation rules, but this does feel like it could and maybe should have been a point where they tried to branch out a bit away from that very strong zombie core, which, was working fine for them at the time, but in retrospect, really wasn't that sustainable. But now on to March 2004, and the Book of Archetypes 2. Another 48-page softcover with 43 archetypes, although notably, now they include Western, pulp, fantasy, and sci-fi type characters. But also a new character type, the Lesser Inspired, 3 new qualities, 4 new essence abilities, including 1 chi technique, and a handful of new equipment. And now, May 2004, and Zombie Smackdown, a 144-page softcover zombie pro wrestling sourcebook. And I actually did a full review of this one because it is the most ridiculous and therefore my favorite sourcebook in the entire series, so you can watch that if you want a more in-depth look into the zombie wrestling book. It provides a lot of information and general rules for professional wrestling, a new character type, the Professional Wrestler, along with 22 qualities, a professional wrestling combat system built on the existing skill system, similar to but distinct from the Enter the Zombie martial arts system, and provides 90 pro wrestling moves. There's also a new Heat system, which is a system for channeling and using Essence, with 16 new Heat maneuvers, which are Essence abilities. 83 new Wrestling weapons, including parts of the ring, and 4 archetypes. Then on the zombie side, there are 7 new wrestling-related aspects, 3 advanced dead worlds, each containing a complete adventure, and 4 basic worlds, each with 2 or 3 short story ideas. And then, of course, all of the zombies, non-zoms, and archetypes that you find in those sorts of things. Also, just in general, this feels like the only book where they actually got a consistent presentation for the dead worlds. Like, each of them provides you with a very solid setting and adventure to have in that setting. Although, it does also feel very much like a wrestling sourcebook with zombies added, instead of a zombie wrestling sourcebook, which, as I said, is an issue. But now onward to July 2004. I think. And One of the Living, a 160-page softcover player's handbook. And despite calling itself that, it is really more of a post-zombie apocalypse sourcebook. It contains new player options like expanded combat rules and random attribute rolling rules. The core rules use a point-buy system, 5 new skills, 16 new qualities, including the suicidal tendencies drawback, which includes rules for resisting suicidal urges and attempting suicide. And I'm not going to say that this is one of those topics that should not be included in role-playing games under any conditions. In fact, quite the opposite. These are the kinds of serious topics that I'm usually in favor of exploring in a responsible and mature way, but this honestly feels like they were trying to handle it as poorly as possible. Then there are 5 new miracles, some new weapons, and 4 archetypes. Rules for scavenging and jury-rigging items in a post-zombie apocalypse world, a whole chapter on campaign building including new sanity rules, extensive rules on zombie decomposition, as well as 13 new zombie aspects, and not exactly but kind of a dead world, they've presented a survivor community, which is just a very detailed location, including several NPCs. Then there are 6 basic dead worlds, which notably are focused on settings where the zombie uprising has already happened, and are stated as being intended to be good for starting points for longer campaigns, which is this game's weak point. It is very well suited to one-shots, and is largely built around that style of play, but survival horror doesn't really lend itself to long ongoing campaigns, and I guess they were trying to find a way to make it lend itself more to long ongoing campaigns. Anyway, each of the dead worlds contains story ideas, appropriate zombies, 1 archetype, and a few other odds and ends. Then there is a section on surviving a zombie survival scenario, and miscellaneous post-apocalypse stuff. And this is weirdly one of the very few all flesh must be eaten books that is actually zombie themed. Like, it builds upon that core zombie survival horror aspect of the game instead of just being some kind of thing and zombies. Incidentally, December 2004, Dungeons & Zombies, a 160-page softcover fantasy sourcebook, and I feel like the title kind of explains the basics of this one, so 2 new character types, the Adept Hero, that's the magic user one, and Talented Hero, which is the non-magic user one. 23 new qualities, and notably here, because this is trying to emulate D&D and All Flesh Must Be Eaten does not have a race or class system to it, both of those things have been implemented as qualities. There's also expanded uses for skills and a new Magic Bolt skill for making spell attacks, plus expanded combat rules, including rules for shields, although oddly enough no other medieval weapons or armor because all of the standard type fantasy weapons and armor are already in the core book. There's also an essence-based magic system with, let's just say, 50 spells, and rules for creating magic items, advice for creating fantasy worlds, and 4 archetypes. Then we have 5 advanced fantasy dead worlds, which each contains story ideas or a small adventure, and 1 full dungeon crawl, plus all the zombies, non-zombs, archetypes, and assorted setting-specific content that you expect from those things. And this is another one of the books where it does have a distinct feeling of, here are some fantasy-type settings, oh, and I guess we'll put some zombies in them, rather than fantasy-type settings based around zombies. Because remember, this whole game is based around zombies. But then in January 2005, the Dungeons & Zombies web enhancement, which basically just covers converting Dungeons & Zombies content for use in other Eden Studios games like Army of Darkness and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But then, nothing until April 2006, and Worlds of the Dead, a 144-page softcover collection of Dead Worlds. And there are 21 here, but without any kind of theme or anything, just everything from 1st century Britain to superheroes to World War I fighter pilots and even space. Just a big grab bags of setting in which to experience zombies in some way, and then all the stuff that goes along with them. Then another year until May 2007, and All Tomorrow's Zombies, a 184-page softcover sci-fi sourcebook, and sadly, the final product release to be announced on the original allflesh.com, which did then sit abandoned until October 2019 before going down and then coming back as a basic-ass WordPress site with a dump of old news, which then also sat abandoned. Fortunately though, as mentioned, it is still accessible via the Wayback Machine, so if you want some stuff like fan-submitted fiction and game content, as well as erratas, character sheets, and such, or just like browsing old-timey websites, I will put a link to that in the description. Anyway, All Tomorrow's Zombies contains basic rules, information, and advice for running science fiction games, with expanded and new skills, 9 general sci-fi qualities, the psionic supernatural quality, and psionic power system, which is basically just the mentalism system from Pulp Zombies and includes 7 psionic powers. Then rules for cybernetics, bioware, and nanotech with 19 different enhancements, futuristic sci-fi equipment, including 5 melee weapons, 8 ranged, 3 explosives, 4 types of armor, and of course miscellaneous items. Expanded vehicle rules, including vehicular combat and starship construction with 22 different options, and new rules for interacting with cyberspace, as well as futuristic hazards like radiation and the vacuum of space. Also 4 archetypes and 4 new zombie aspects. Then 5 advanced and 2 basic Dead Worlds with all of the things that come with those. And more than any other book in the series, this one feels the most like cyberpunk with zombies, Aliens with zombies, The Matrix with zombies, Star Wars with zombies, etc. And most of the time the zombies' presence in the settings feel arbitrary at best. Then nothing for several years, until August 2010, and ARG, the Arby Zombies, a 170-page softcover pirate supplement, and I feel like it would be remiss of me to not mention that this product was announced and at least somewhat worked on in 2006. Anyway, it includes basic rules, information, and advice for running pirate-themed games, including rules for sailing and ship-to-ship combat, the silver screen swashbuckler character type, 24 general and 2 supernatural qualities, 17 zombie aspects, including 4 each of new constitution and willpower type aspects, as well as one that makes the zombies a skeleton. Plus rules for making ghost ships, which are basically zombies because of how the game operates, including 2 new ghost ship aspects. Piratey equipment, including 13 melee weapons, 11 firearms, including cannons, a powder keg, breastplate, 14 ships, and, miscellaneous stuff. A chapter-long voodoo system, because, of course there is, with 38 miracles and rituals. 3 advanced and 2 basic Dead Worlds, one of which is basically Spelljammer versus the Borg, plus 3 additional story ideas with 2 more zombies. And I will say, relative to a lot of the other books, this one does actually feel like the zombies fit into the settings a lot better. But then a relatively short hop to June 2011 and The Waking Dead. No, not walking, waking. And this was a 32-page booklet for Free RPG Day 2011, and is the second introductory game kit with quick start rules, archetypes, and an adventure where you wake in the hospital and find yourself in the middle of a zombie outbreak. Yeah, it is in fact that blatant. And they were never shy of borrowing ideas, but I feel like there is an important difference between we put zombies in Star Wars and we copied another popular zombie media franchise in a way that could definitely create brand confusion. Anyway, then after another year off, September 2013, and Band of Zombies, a 172-page softcover World War II sourcebook, which includes all of the basic rules, information, and advice for running a Weird War II game, with 12 new qualities, 5 new essence abilities, and 5 new zombie aspects, as well as 22 new firearms, 20 types of explosives, 8 tanks, 17 aircraft, and 5 sea vehicles, as well as 4 archetypes. There's also some greatly expanded combat rules covering things such as aerial combat, naval combat, mass combat, and tactical miniature combat, which wasn't really a thing in Unisystem at all, but All Flesh Must Be Eaten specifically. Then there is the Altered History Dead World that they refer to as the first full campaign setting for All Flesh Must Be Eaten, and there is quite a bit of detail to it. By a wide margin, it is the most detailed setting for this game. Then there are also 4 things I would call dead worlds, but they are not really dead worlds in the sense that they are distinct settings, but just different parts of the same setting focusing on different theaters of World War II, but do have all the stuff that you would normally see in the dead worlds. And finally, October 2013, and the All Flesh Must Be Eaten character journal, which is a 16-page character journal. You know, one of those things that you see lots of, but never actually see anyone using. And that was the complete product history of All Flesh Must Be Eaten, a game that was published at the absolute best possible time to release a zombie role-playing game. A massive surge in zombie pop culture relevance was just starting, as well as an explosion in casual web users, which meant that a lot of people suddenly wanted zombie content and had the means to find it, which worked out really well if you happened to be publishing the first zombie role-playing game, which is exactly what Eden Studios was doing at the time. And when people were buying everything zombies, publishing everything zombies was a good strategy. But it really feels like at some point, All Flesh Must Be Eaten just kinda became the default Unisystem product line. Like, if Eden Studios wanted to publish a fantasy, sci-fi, or wrestling game, it made more sense from a business perspective to publish it as part of their most successful product line, even if it wasn't the best creative decision. And in general, it just kind of ends up feeling like D20 Modern and zombies, in that it seems like they're trying to do everything at once, be your option for every kind of game, but with the added handicap of also having to make everything zombies. Like I pointed out several times, a lot of the supplements feel like they are genre sourcebooks, with just enough zombies added to them to make them All Flesh Must Be Eaten sourcebooks. The big difference, of course, being that underneath the 80-some-odd random micro settings, All Flesh Must Be Eaten actually has a core concept that it does well, but didn't really focus on that much. Also, it did predate, outlive, and outproduce D20 Modern without massive corporate backing. And the problem with riding a pop culture wave like that is that it's one of those things that only works in your favor until it doesn't, and by the late 2000s, that zombie wave had crashed, and All Flesh Must Be Eaten seems to have crashed with it. And while it did look like there may have been an attempt to rekindle interest in the early 2010s with the long-awaited release of Arg, Thar Be Zombies, a new introductory kit, and the Band of Zombies Kickstarter, it just kinda buried itself once again right after that. Although I would just like to point out that compatibility with D20 Modern was probably not the best feature to highlight when trying to create excitement for your 12-year-old game in 2011. And here we are in 2023. No All Flesh Must Be Eaten book since 2013, and the last update of any kind on the Eden Studios website from 2014. And then not even a social media post since 2020. So unfortunately, it seems like Eden Studios, like a lot of other smaller publishers from that time period, just isn't making new content anymore. And it is worth mentioning that they did also publish 3 zombie fiction collections under the All Flesh Must Be Eaten brand during the game's run, and were even developing a movie, but information on that one just kind of evaporates after 2002, so I'm assuming it did not make its fall 2003 release date. And that is it for All Flesh Must Be Eaten. Very much a product of its time. They hit upon the exact right topic at the exact right time, and that allowed for the explosion of gaming content that they were able to create. It is one of those things that almost certainly could not happen again. And would I like to see it crawl back out of the grave one more time? Yeah, I would. Although for that to really work, it would have to be a new All Flesh Must Be Eaten, with modern design focused around that core zombie survival horror concept. Not just the same book released a third time. But even if that's a thing I want to happen, it is not even close to a thing I expect to happen. And thank you for watching, with extra special thanks to my Fightin' Flail Snails, Randy Mulholland, and Toshiro Okuro. If you'd like to be cool like them, you can check out my Patreon, where you can get early access to videos and fun stuff that I make for the Patreon. But if you don't want to do that, that's cool too. You can still hit all the lovely buttons, like, subscribe, these other videos floating around the screen right now, which either myself or the cold, heartless YouTube algorithm have lovingly selected for you, and I'm sure are lovely videos that you will also enjoy. And I will see you next time.